What's up, Hokie Nation, and welcome into a Tech Sideline Article Spotlight. We record on Monday, August 19th, 2024 from the Tech Sideline High-Tech Studios in Blacksburg, Virginia. Alongside our lead analyst and columnist, Chris Coleman, I'm your host for today, Carter Hill. Chris, we're going to talk heights and weights today. I feel like it's that time of year where you can really break things down, and I know you did in a recent article on TechSideline.com.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite articles to write every year, just to keep up with the year-by-year progress of specific players. And some guys, they get to a certain point in their careers and you don't see as many gains. But a lot of guys, especially early in their careers, the gains are pretty evident.
So I want to hit on some of your main talking points in the story. The top 5 defensive ends on this team are all between 251 and 253.
Right.
Clearly, there's a little bit of a template there.
There's definitely a template. So, yeah, APR, Cole Nelson, Keyshawn Burgos, McCray and Jordan McDonald are all between 251 and 253 and between 6'3 and 6'5. Not all of those guys were recruited by J.C. Price. There's a couple guys that were recruited by, the previous regime, and McDonald actually came in as kind of an athlete. But all those guys are redshirt or juniors or seniors, and they've been in college long enough to where you can kind of mold them. As long as they work hard, you can mold them into your vision, and that seems like the vision for J.C. Price. You want to have a little bit of size at defensive end, of course, but you don't want to be too big because you want those guys to be able to run. So that 251 to 253 range kind of sounds like the happy medium to me.
Seems like that's the profile he's going to continue to recruit to, it looks like.
I think so, is what it looks like to me. You've got Jason Abbey, a redshirt freshman, and Derek Dandy, a true freshman. They're both listed at 240 right now, and they were both 215 as recruits, and then Abbey was 225 when he redshirted last year. Dandy's put on a lot of weight since he enrolled in January. So these two guys look like, they're 6'3 and 6'4. So they've got the frame to be in that template, the 251 to 253 template. Not that it's 250 to 251,
sure,
but it's probably in the 250 to 260 range, ideal, and it just happens to be 251 to 253 this year. But those two guys have that frame. The two defensive ends for the 2025 class, they have commitments from at this point. They all have that same basic frame and body structure. So you can definitely see a plan coming together. And after guys have been in the same weight room program for a few years, it becomes more evident. And I think it's more evident this year.
And for Jason Abbey and Derek Dandy, it sounds like they'll probably need to get to that 250 range, though, before they're quote-unquote needed on this team.
Well, I think they're not needed this year because there's just 5 guys ahead of them. You can't rotate any more than 5 defensive ends, and at that point you lose effectiveness. The good thing is this is a good basic developmental plan for these programs. Jason Abbey next year, after the Hokies lose a couple of defensive ends, he'll be a redshirt sophomore, probably in the 250 range, about the time a player should be getting significant reps in his college career. And, Dandy will be a redshirt freshman. Maybe he'll be there. Maybe he'll still be a year away. But you can see the plan taking shape.
So a guy that a lot of people obviously are going to talk about is Malachi Thomas, somebody who's obviously behind Bayshalt Sutin, but he's up to 215. And that can certainly help with his tackle breaking ability.
Yeah, I believe he was 197 when he was a true freshman, and he got up to 207 last year, and now 215. I really think his freshman year, he had 2 100-yard games back-to-back, Syracuse and Georgia Tech. He had a good year for a true freshman, but most of his success, he had good blocking that year. Vance Weiss's offensive line was good, and Thomas had very good vision. He was not a tackle-breaking guy. He was a skinny running back. In fact, that year, he only forced a missed tackle once every 15.5 carries.
Yeah.
So basically, like once a game, he would force a missed tackle is basically what that equals out to in terms of, modern carries for a running back. Last year, after he had added 10 pounds of muscle and was a couple years older, he went only 4.9 carries per forced missed tackle. So he was basically forcing a missed tackle once every 5 carries as opposed to once every 15.5 carries. So significant improvement that I think you can directly say that added strength and mass helped him out. Well, now he's made even more gains between last year and this year. So you would theoretically expect that number to go up a little bit. It's not going to take a huge jump because the huge jump has already come from 15.5 to 4.9. But, if you can get that down to 4 or 3.5, something like that, it just adds another dimension to the offense.
And then Gerard Johnson is up to 286. It seems like you project his future as at a defensive tackle spot.
Yeah, unless Tech decides to switch to a 3-4 overnight, which I don't think that's going to happen. Gerard Johnson, he was a 4-star guy coming out of high school, defensive end. Tech listed him, or excuse me, not Tech, 247 listed him at 235 on the recruiting page. But that wasn't accurate. All you had to do was look at his huddle highlights, and you could tell that he was a lot bigger than 235. And I think he was 255, listed at 255 in the spring when he was at Virginia Tech, which pretty much at the time made him the biggest true freshman defensive end ever. So I always expected this move was going to happen. I didn't know it would happen quite this quick. But yeah, up to 286, that's a substantial jump. I expect he's played his last down on the edge.
Okay. And then somebody that for us locally, like growing up in Blacksburg and Nick growing up in Radford, like it's one of those things where looking at Gunnar Gibbons' projection, you know, we saw him play at Lord Botetourt High School, and now it seems like he's put himself in better shape to play on the offensive line.
Yeah, he's a guy who wanted to play defensive line in college initially. You know, he was up to the 280, 290 range in high school, then decided he wanted to be a defensive lineman. Specifically, at first, he wanted to be a defensive end, so I think he actually dropped down to the 255 to 260 range at one point. And then when it became clear that if he was going to be a defensive lineman in college, it was going to be not as an edge player. He was going to be an interior lineman. Then he got back up to 285, 290 range his first couple of years at Virginia Tech. So he's always been a guy that's shown the ability to add and drop weight very quickly. He's a very hard worker, very conscientious worker about his diet and everything like that. Now he's moved back to offensive line. So he's gone from 286 last year, and I believe he's up to 322.
I can double check.
Yeah, I think it's 322. So it's a 36-pound difference. Again, he can just, it's like he can add or drop a lot of weight on a dime, which is, you know, credit to his work ethic and things like that. But yeah, he couldn't stay at 286, which he was last year, and hope to have success on the offensive line. He needed to add weight. He added more in a short amount of time than I thought he would be able to. Now, he's not going to be in the 2 deep this year, most likely, barring injuries, but he's given himself a puncher's chance for the future because now he's able to get in there and practice and compete with those defensive linemen, and throw his mass around, so to speak, because he was always kind of lean. He always had a big frame, but he didn't necessarily have a lot of mass, and now he's got more mass to go on top of it.
I was going to say, do you see him contributing anytime soon, maybe 2025?
Oh, yeah, I think he'll have a chance to get in the 2 deep next year possibly, because, you know, you're going to lose a couple seniors on the right side of the line. But so he'll have a chance there. But at the same time, you know, there's going to be either 1 or 2 starting spots open next year. He's got a lot of competition in the program. There's a lot. There's just not that. There's 2 or 3 senior linemen, but not all that many. And there's a lot of young guys in the 2 deep fighting for playing time. He's given himself a chance. But because this is only his second semester on the offensive line, you know, he's starting from a little further back than those other guys.
We are 12 days away, Chris. Mm-hmm. That's crazy. 5 days from Florida State, Georgia Tech.
That's right.
Noon in Ireland, I think.
The week 0 game. Is it noon?
I think it's noon Eastern time. What, are they 5 hours ahead?
Yeah, I think that's right. I went to the game last year, the Notre Dame Navy game, and it was definitely a night kickoff over there. It was a great atmosphere for it.
Just to put a bow on everything, did you see Brett McMurphy's projections today?
I did.
Virginia Tech is in the college football playoff, according to him.
Well, let's stop the season and start playing them right now.
Yeah. Well, I actually was going to ask you real fast before we hop off. Like, I should have actually asked Eric Macklin this the other day when we were all on with him. Virginia Tech's going to be good this year. I think a lot of the fan base sees them winning, probably a little bit unrealistically, 10, 11 games. When you see that, is the fan base almost setting itself up, and I don't mean to be negative, for a little bit of disappointment? Like, do you see Virginia Tech realistically winning in that 10 to 11 game threshold when in reality it's probably 8 to 9?
Yeah, I think that's their ceiling.
Yeah.
I think if everything goes right, they certainly can do that. If you know, like, so Miami's a losable game, Clemson's a losable game. If one of those games happens to be like the turnovers go in Tech's favor in that particular game. Sometimes turnovers can be random. If the turnovers go in favor for the Hokies in that game and they turn one of their probable losses into a win, And, that jumps it up from 9 wins to 10 wins, or from 10 wins to 11 wins, or from 8 wins to 9 wins. Who knows? Something like that. This team, I don't know where you set the over and under, 8.5, 9.5, something like that. There's a lot of varying opinions on it. I see so many strengths on this team. I think we know what the strengths are. It just depends on how much their weaknesses have improved. The offensive line, to me, doesn't look, and what tiny little bit I've seen, it doesn't look tremendously improved from last year, but they're also going up against what I consider to be a really good defensive line. So it can be kind of hard to tell. It is kind of hard to tell in practices and scrimmages. So you have to get out there and play somebody else before you truly know. But I understand what you're asking. I would be interested to do a poll, like, how many wins do you expect this year? And maybe we should do that poll on TSL. It would I think it's a good idea to get a read on what the fan base thinks is realistic this year. It could be anywhere from, what do you expect? 8, 9, 10, 11, or 12 wins. I don't know.
Well, just the only reason I ask is it's like people are saying, oh, Virginia Tech football is going to be awesome this year. Well, growing up for us, like Virginia Tech football, when they were awesome, we're winning 10, 11 games and in the ACC title game. Yeah. They're going to be good, but I think it's a fascinating point for sure.
I think this team, for me, is probably a little bit closer to the 2016 team than like the 2011 team.
Yeah.
I think. But, that team won 10 games and played for an ACC title, didn't win an ACC title. But, I think as long as they get to 9 wins and they show overall improvement, I think the fan base will be happy. That's my gut feel right now. That said, with so many seniors on the roster this year, you want to take advantage of this window as much as possible.
What is coming up on TechSideline.com the rest of the week?
Andy Bitter is going to have an article today, I believe, about the defensive line. I'm going to continue my preseason look at each position, and then have a Friday Q&A. And then next Monday starts game week. But our first piece of content next Monday is going to be a top prospects article, which I write every August, and is my absolute favorite article to write every year. So looking forward to that one.
Chris, appreciate the time as always. The knowledge is like through the roof, so appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
For Chris Coleman, Nick Brown, I'm Carter Hill. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time.